the day of my birth, parents were stuck in a snowstorm getting to the hospital, and my mother's water broke in the car. And I was born literally 20 minutes after arriving at the hospital. So I feel like this is how I got started. Like, I got to get out of here. I got to get working. I got to get moving. And that's also been the pattern of my life. I've always been in this perpetual rush since my birth.
Where are you going?
I got to get to my studio. I got to make shit.
Welcome back to Blessings, my friends. I'm sitting here with an old friend. I have known Ricky Boscarino for about 20 years, and I swear he ages backwards. He epitomizes the phrase artistic expression, and perhaps it is that level of unbridled creativity that is the fountain of youth. Ricky is art. His home and atelier, Luna Parc, is in rural Sussex County, New Jersey, and it's a place of wonder. The whimsical grounds are a work of art filled for acres with sculptures made of metal, clay, glass, mosaic, bowling balls, blue jars, license plates, and many other random and not so random objects.
Just to name
Yes, there's much, much more. His home showcases all kinds of cool and quirky memorabilia, like a museum of curiosities. You have to see it to experience it. It is indescribable. There's no way you could list out all of the items that are there. He makes Seuss-like ceramics and amazing face pots, really cool jewelry, and he paints as well. He offers workshops and tours and heads the Luna Parc Atelier Foundation, Incorporated. And this is a nonprofit with a mission to facilitate creativity in all people, especially creative youth, by demonstrating the creative process with actual hands-on activity. What does Ricky not do is the question. So let's dig into his story to find out how a boy from Piscataway became a massively successful multimedia artist. Welcome, Ricky.
Thank you, Mitzi. Great to be here.
Do you have an inventory of all of the things in your home and property?
Actually, as a matter of fact, this past summer, I had an intern who was going to start this monumental task of cataloging my collection. This woman, she's a local, she lives in Beamerville, and she's a journalism major in school. And she started off to just photographing some of the objects. Now, keep in mind, this is for everyone in your audience who doesn't even know Luna Parc. There are literally hundreds of thousands of objects in the house that I've gathered from all over the world, all over the country, from travels, wherever. And there's literally hundreds of thousands of objects that need to be photographed and then entered into a database. So this is probably, I'm going to say it's probably at least a 5-year project just to catch up. I am constantly bringing objects and finding artwork or whatever the objects are. So at some point I'll catch up. And then at that point, I'll just proceed. And I think what I'll do is I'll have a holding area where things can't get dispersed or incorporated into the museum without first getting photographed and then put into the database. But it's a daunting project, and not every single object in the house is worthy of categorizing. So I think, but there's a lot of really significant objects, and everything has a story. The story could be where I found the object, where if I purchased it, any stories about that, and I have a lot of different categories within the collection also. So it's just like literally a monumental task. So I'm just really sorting out how I have to organize this. So, but
that is incredible. The collection is massive, like beyond massive. You're not exaggerating when you say hundreds of thousands of items. It is so cool. You can go there and see something different every time you go, every minute that you go. You could be in the same room.
One of the inspirations for this is that you mentioned in the intro, the nonprofit, the Luna Parc Atelier Foundation, who will ultimately then own the house, the contents, everything. And I don't want to leave this earth without this happening, because there are literally hundreds and hundreds of objects, thousands of objects that no one would have any idea where they came from. They might be able to identify the objects, but as far as the stories, that's all like right here. It's in my head. It's in a lot of different journals, my travel journals as well. But most of these stories are actually in my head right now. And that's a scary thought.
You've got to get that out. I love this that you're doing this. It's amazing. It's amazing. And I can see it's at least a 5-year task. That girl maybe will have a job for at least 5 years. So there's some security.
Yeah, I know. And I have a feeling it's going to be multiple people working on this. So I haven't even gotten the museum software yet. I was just starting with making a database of photographs first.
Yeah.
But that is the next step. I need to get this museum software. And then I've got the advice of some people that I know that run small museums.
Yeah.
So they've told me what I need to get, what would be the best software to get. And I just need to get that and actually just start entering these objects and just dictating the story of such as, so in one room of the house, I call it my hall of hats. Wherever I've been, all over Asia, Northern Africa, all over Europe, wherever I've been in the world, I've collected a hat from the culture, a hat that speaks of maybe the religion, something about the geography, the culture, the costumes. So wherever I've collected a hat, and that's in this one kind of central, like a hallway. I call it the Hall of Hats. And that is probably where I'll start, because for me, that's one of my most favorite collections. And it's a metaphor because I wear so many hats in life. So my Hall of Hats is actually really special. So that's probably where I'll start and arrange it possibly room by room.
Oh, that is just wonderful. I love that you just mentioned it was a metaphor for your life because you do wear so many hats. Like I said, there's not much that Ricky does not do. Let's go back and talk a little bit about how you got to be this man, this person, this amazing world traveler who collects all of these wonderful objects and creates them. You're just like, you're probably, I think without a doubt, you are the most creative person I know.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny. It's a most frequently asked question when people come here. Oh, first they want to know, did I have a master plan about this house? But we can broach that subject later. But I come from a long line of Italian artisans. So for many generations, my old, even ancient Italian ancestors were basically carpenters, masons, any kind of woodworking. And the name Boscarino, which means little forest, by the way, dates back to the time of the Medici. We claim that we were the peasant carpenters to the Medici. So many generations, my paternal grandfather and his brother were my early childhood memories of woodworking and carpentry and knowing how to build things. They were amazing builders. They can build anything. My Uncle Benny, who actually lived in Sparta Lake, which is right on the border of Jefferson and Sparta, and he had a workshop, which was still one of my wonderful childhood memories because his specialty was grandfather clocks. And his shop was filled with a grandfather clock that was in any stage of completion, furniture, built-ins, whatever he was commissioned to do, he would make. So that was Uncle Benny. My grandfather was also a carpenter, more like a practical house builder. And my dad always said that no matter how lean times were during the Depression, my grandfather was always busy with work because he could build, and he basically supported the family through the Depression because he was such a skilled carpenter. And then my dad is amazing. Also, he can build anything. When I was growing up, he was also a graphic artist. So I got this knowledge of graphic design as well as, so 2D as well as 3D. And then even on my mom's side of the family, we had amazing seamstresses, amazing chefs. So both sides of the family, I had this whole great lineage of artisans and craftsmen and fun, kooky thinkers. And especially on my mom's side, we're always feuding with each other. There was always someone that was holding a grudge a bit for someone. But the point is that they were really passionate,
Yeah.
arguing. And there was a lot of intellectuals and a lot of alcoholics also, but that's beside the point. But really funny, fun, smart people, more so on my mother's side of the family. And then the real tactile, creative side was my father's side.
So you got it
So,
from both sides.
yes. Yep, definitely. Sorry, that was my mother's calling to check up on me, and she's probably going to call right back.
Okay.
So I'm just going to decline it because she calls 4 or 5 times a day.
You can
So,
send her a message if you want.
no, that's okay.
Okay.
It's their landline anyways. No,
Okay.
it's
Oh, that's funny. Oh my gosh. All right. That's really interesting. And I love that you have positioned all of those people that were seamstresses and woodworkers and people working with their hands as creative and artisans, because that's really where our original creativity, like people think of creative people as people who just create art or some kind of esoteric object. But really, that's where true art comes from. Those
yeah, and even we had amazing chefs in my family, like
Mm.
amazing cooks. And my 2 sisters and I, we grew up knowing how to cook, which is pretty rare. I know, believe me, because I have these young interns that live here on the property that have not the slightest clue of how to operate in the kitchen. And we were always very facile on the stovetop. And so both my sisters and I really picked up that, and more by observation, but also assisting. Some of my wonderful childhood memories was making pasta with my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. And my mother was like she was like a chef, really like a gourmet chef.
Mm.
And we were always having meals, like amazing meals. And there was a point where my mother and I started learning how to make souffles. And then I took off on this, and I would make souffles for my family for dinner or a dessert souffle. So I got actually really good at making souffles. And this is at 14 years old, maybe. So my training went way, way, way back to infancy, really, actually. I joke how, actually, this is true, though. My birthday is actually on Friday, this coming Friday. And the day of my birth, parents were stuck in a snowstorm getting to the hospital, and my mother's water broke in the car, and I was born literally 20 minutes after arriving at the hospital. So I feel like this is how I got started. Like, I got to get out of here. I got to get working. I got to get moving. And that's also been the pattern of my life. I've always been in this perpetual rush since my birth.
Where are you going?
I got to get to my studio. I got to make shit.
You can swear.
Okay.
That's so funny. I love that so much. And that's the interesting thing too about you in particular as an artist, is that I've known a lot of artists and a lot of people who get ideas and then bring them to life, but you do that on steroids. You get an idea and you bring it to life, and it's like magical.
Yeah, and when that's something that process I did, I had to practice it, but from a very young age, I didn't maybe mastered it, because I would have these ideas, and I was also fortunate that in our basement of our house growing up, and I grew up in Piscataway, New Jersey, and we had a full wood shop, and I started learning how to use a jigsaw when I was probably like maybe 7 or 8 years old, under the guidance and vision of my father. But pretty soon after it, I would just have this idea of a project, and with scrap wood or whatever, start making them. And I was making furniture and like these wooden wall hangings out of like scraps of plywood. And I tell you, I wish I had some of those, because honestly, some of them were actually really good. And I was really young. I was like 12, 13, 14, and into my teens also, later teens. And I wish I had some of those, but I think they were all sold at one of my parents' yard sales when they were leaving Piscataway. But I think they're probably out there. Maybe they're in some antique store or something.
Yes, I am sure those objects are out there somewhere and someone is really enjoying them. Wouldn't it be cool to come across one? That's
You know what? I fantasized that about for years. I would imagine they're probably local. They're probably somewhere in central New Jersey. And I often thought, oh my God, what if I was ever at an antique store? And I don't know if I got into the habit of signing things at that age. I think some of them I would. And it's funny because when I have students, I tell them the most important thing when you're finished with a project, the most important thing is to sign and date your work. And I don't know why artists have such an issue or a block about signing and dating their work for just the most basic reason. It gives the piece a time and a place and a person, and nothing leaves my workshop without sign and date. Nothing. I think it's like criminal. It's missing information. It's the last piece of the last detail of the piece is signing and dating. And it's not like for ego egotistical reasons. But it's important. It's important for objects. And my whole life is about objects, making objects, collecting objects,
yes.
and all the artwork, anything like that. It's got to have a time and a place and a person attached to it. So that's why I insist. And so I don't even know if these pieces were signed, but if someone was interested in finding me, it would be very easy to find me if they were signed. Of course, they wouldn't say Ricky of Luna Parc. They'd say Ricky Boscarino. So.
Okay. When did you start thinking of yourself as an artist?
Birth.
So you knew.
I knew. No, I was, like I said, the first media that I really knew and was comfortable was wood, coming from this line of carpenters. And there was always wood in the house. There was always scraps of wood, plywood or 2x4s. And I got into whittling, like little wood carving. And I would do like carvings of animals. And I think some of them were really quite good. They're all gone. I don't even know what happened. I probably gave them away or something, but there's a good chance that those things are out in the world somewhere as well. So I do think about that, what's happened to all these pieces that I made in my early childhood. But no, I was always creative, literally I'm not joking when I say like practically from birth. As soon as I was able to hold crayons or paper or whatever, I was making it and doing stuff. And a lot of that was facilitated by my parents, who were artistic and knew the value of art. And so we just grew up in this really wonderful creative household where art was always encouraged. It was never, ever discouraged. And that's another thing that I've learned from my students, that some of them grow up in these households where they could either be not encouraged or just flat out discouraged from doing art. And I felt bad about it. Actually, I recently had a little argument I had a tour of Girl Scouts. And I yelled at this one mom and she had even admitted that she wasn't very encouraging. And as though, I don't know, long story short, I get very angry and worked up when I hear about parents who are not encouraging. I can understand the not encouraging is basically not educated in the encouraging their child, but to be discouraging of art, I think that is the worst thing a parent or any relative could do. And it makes my blood boil when I hear about that, because that's completely the antithesis of what I'm all about here in my mission. The mission of the foundation and Luna Parc and everything is all about complete encouragement to the point of indulging. So
that's true. But because creation and art is the highest form of self-expression.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a lot of different forms of art. Mine happens to be visual art, but I encourage anyone who's musically inclined or anything like that to follow this passion. And for what goes on here, we're pretty much about three-dimensional art. There's a lot of things going on here, but I would say a lot of the approach, or my approach, is three-dimensional sculpt. The mosaic is somewhat 2D, but the 2D, the mosaics are always applied onto a 3D surface. So
Mhm.
it's part of the whole process of doing art. So any of my interns, basically, the internships are about a sculptural approach to their art and to their life, in fact.
Yeah. Everything is metaphor with you, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't analyze it, but yeah, everything is about art in my house. Everything about being an artist, being a curator, and it's all about art. Not all the pieces are art, but a lot of them are. Even some of the weird artifacts. I have a display case that's filled with things that I've gotten all over Asia. And they could be as simple as I have these. I was in Jaipur, India, and I went to this flea market, and it was amazing. This is stuff that's, I wouldn't say like ancient, but so I got these. They're tweezers that are made of iron, and they're like literally forged out. They have this beautiful repoussé work, and they're probably from the mid 1800s, so the mid 19th century. And I have a collection of those that I found, and they're just beautifully decorated. And then it's funny, I was on the street. It was like a street sidewalk, and someone had these. They look like tiny little spoons, but they're actually ear cleaners. So you actually like scoop out the earwax, and they were on like a little ring. There was probably got to be like maybe 20 or 30 of them on a little ring. And I asked how much they were, and he started to take one off. And I said, no, I want all of them. And it came to, I don't know, $1, something like that. But each of these little spoons has like a little decoration on them. And so I'm especially interested in personal affects,
Mm.
personal objects that people have actually used. So I have this ear cleaners and tweezers. I have these really interesting makeup containers. They're from the Berber women, the nomadic people from Northern Africa. And it's the makeup called kohl, Kohl. And it's made of literally like charcoal and beeswax. And these are these eyeliner containers. So they store it, and some of them actually had an old mirror on it. So it's like an applicator, so they would actually use it. So I have a whole collection of those, beautiful, also made by the Berber people. These are gunpowder containers, and they're just beautiful objects that someone would have dangling from their belt. And everything has a decoration on it. And so that's always what's inspired me about gathering things from foreign countries is the amount of artistry that people would apply in anything, no matter how small or significant or insignificant the object is. There was decoration, and that was all through, even in America, all through history until the mid, maybe like the 1950s. And all of a sudden, there are certainly wonderful decorative arts from that period, but we started losing some of the aesthetics. And now, when you go into tract homes or new homes, there's such a level of blandness.
Mhm.
And we've lost all of the sensibilities of everyday objects being beautiful. You look
Yeah.
at decorative arts from the Victorian period, and something as simple as a light switch or a doorknob would just be beautifully rendered. And for me, that's always been something that I've wanted to go back to is making a home that's completely wrought, no matter how banal the piece would be, a cabinet knob or a doorknob or a light switch plate, whatever it is, there would be some application, some aesthetic application for these pieces.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I don't know how I got off subject. I was
I don't
talking
know.
about
I love that.
the
No,
Berber
there's so much
people.
there.
Yeah.
There's
So I
so
have this
much
one.
there because it's true. These utilitarian items, they're just like practical and dead and flat,
Yeah.
whereas they used to be much more celebrated and alive.
Yeah. Anything that people would want, useful objects that they would literally hang from their outfit or from
Yeah.
their belt. No one would go out of the house without something being a beautiful object, because even that was an expression of themselves. So that's something I always thought that with my mission to get back to and try to encourage that by students to understand how not only making objects, but making things within the home and living with art, no matter what the application is.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes your home alive with the soul of the artist.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's almost like surrounding yourself with others, with people. Do you feel like
Mhm.
that's what you're doing with your objects?
Absolutely. Even my collection of my coffee mugs and my glasses, drinking glasses. Now, there was a time earlier in my life, I loved kitsch. When kitsch is anything like collectible state glasses or souvenir glasses and mugs that were like tourist mugs from the 50s and 60s or whatever.
Mhm.
And the more I started doing craft shows, which was like in the early 80s, I started doing craft shows with my own work and being surrounded by other people who were making things that I couldn't make, like hand blown drinking glasses and things like that. And then my tastes shifted from the like kind of collectible, kitschy, campy objects to handmade. And now all of my mugs are all handmade by a lot of them are people that I met or I meet during craft shows. All of my drinking glasses are all hand blown from people I meet at craft shows. Sometimes I trade to do a barter or I buy them. But so aspects in the house are also all about handmade as well.
Yeah. There's something about the energy that changes the frequency of your home and the
Right. Yeah,
vibration that's in there.
I agree.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I'm really curious about when you were growing up, if you were a young child or even a teenager, how your relationships were with the other kids. Did they get you? Did you feel understood? Were you this
Oh my
creative that
God. I was a total outcast underdog. One of the things was I started school a year early. So it was my birthday was in the middle of December, and my mother was able to get me into school when I was 4. So I was always like kind of the youngest. I was always the littlest, the skinniest, and I'm glad she did that because I think for that next year between 4 and 5 years old, I think I would have been really bored and ready to like my mind was already like
yeah.
going. As hard as that was at different points in my life to be always the youngest, I was already on a little bit of a head start actually for kids that were my age. But no, I was always the oddball. I basically retreated to my art, my little projects, whatever it was. And I also loved science at that time. I grew up loving studying insects, entomology, and I spent a lot of time out in the fields behind my house. We grew up, there was a big farm just down the street, which is now a subdivision. but there was just such wonderful bucolic memories of collecting insects and spending lots and lots of time in these big open fields with insects. And so science was always a big part of my life as well. At a very young age, I understood this integration between art and science. I still have my boyhood insect collections also, but the art of like arranging them and into collections. And yeah, so that was another kind of formative aspect in my life was my love of science
Mhm.
and maybe also set me apart from other kids because I was really passionate about my science biology. I am very happy though that at some point in my late in high school that my right brain took over and pushed me on that path of art rather than going into academics as I think I would have been so unhappy had I made that the left brain path into academics because I was not a good student. And I
Mm,
also had somewhat of a reading disability.
mm.
I don't think it would have been diagnosed as dyslexic, but I had a really hard time reading, which is why I dove into visual arts also is something that I could completely excel in where I couldn't as an academic student. So
Mhm.
that was very fortunate. But going back to your original question, yeah, I was always the oddball underdog, just retreated to my own fantasy of my projects, basically. They weren't really fantasies, but they were three-dimensional, they were objects, they were something tangible that I learned how to do.
Did you have bullies?
Yes, in school, there was some terrible bullies. That's funny. Last night, I was thinking about some of the bullies in high school.
Mm.
I thought, I should look them up on on Facebook and see
what they've
what they're like.
accomplished.
Yeah, what if they account? Probably nothing.
Right.
Not to be mean, but to be mean.
Yeah,
But
it's often the case.
yeah, exactly. But yeah. So, but that's, and I'm still an oddball as far as like what I'm creating here is very unusual for normal people, and people come here to Luna Park and they ask me, where do you live? Where actually do you live? They think this is some big folly and I live somewhere else, or I live next door or another house or something. And for me, it's just obviously it's every day and I don't think of it any different, but I still think I'm a sort of a pariah in the art world. And what the other thing is that there's this term that I absolutely hate, and it's called outsider artist. So outsider artist it was coined in the 70s for people who didn't have any formal art training. Like these people didn't go to art school, they didn't have they didn't even have mentors maybe. Some outsider artists were actually in institutions. So the term outsider artist refers to something that's literally outside the box. But because I did go to art school, I am disqualified from the term outsider. But my work has never been mainstream. Nothing I've ever done is mainstream. So people don't know where to categorize me, even in the world of outsider art, the term outsider art. I'm a pariah in outsider art. So I think, how am I? I don't even know. If you asked me right now, if that was the next question, how do you categorize yourself? I don't know. I don't know where I fall in the lineage in art history. It's certainly unique, but yeah, I don't know where and I stopped defining. I've stopped trying to define
Right.
what it is because it doesn't matter. And I
No,
think the term outsider is really pretty stupid, actually.
actually, yes, absolutely. That's terrible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I could be called a visionary artist, and a
Yes.
visionary artist doesn't have the stigma of being non-trained. It's not about if you went to art school or not. The fact is that I am self-taught on pretty much every media except maybe my jewelry making, which is what I went to college for. Yeah, so I'm self-taught anyway in most of my medium, uh, clay, wood, my metal work. I never had a formal lesson in welding. Certainly, cementing bottles together or mosaic, for that matter. I've never taken a mosaic class. This artist, she was a ceramic artist named Natalie Serving. She lived up in New York State, not far in Warwick. And I was at her house one day, and she had all this broken pottery, and she was cementing it to this wall. And I thought, oh, that's really great. And that was very early in the time that I lived here. And I started cementing stuff onto a wall, and now at least 80% of my house inside and out is mosaic. So that's
Yes.
something I learned it myself. I taught it myself, going back to this term of outsider artist, or as well as or opposed to a trained artist. It's so immaterial. It's just, it gets me all like angry and all this.
Yeah, no, it's such a good point because I think a lot of people, because they have the inhibition of thinking they need some kind of formal training, it prevents them from pursuing things, whether it's a dream or just even something simple. You can do this on your own. There is no rule that says you can't go ahead and try to learn something on your own because you don't need a certificate that says you're now an expert in something in order
Yeah.
to do it. You can do
Yeah.
it.
And I taught so many people how to do mosaic and how to do concrete casting and almost everyone, all the students that come here, the interns, everyone learns how to weld also. And I'm not like a great welder, but everyone I feel like it's an important foundation that everyone who comes here learns how to weld also.
Yeah.
So,
It really is amazing what you do. I think you're like the Willy Wonka of art.
yes, somewhere throw in Pee Wee Herman and Martha Stewart in there too.
That's true. Would that be your alter ego, those three? Be great.
I always joked how if I ever had my own TV show, it would be a combination of Martha Stewart meets Pee Wee Herman. Yeah, so I find that there's a lot of references. Dr. Seuss, Pee Wee Herman, Martha Stewart, Disney, whatever, all that stuff. Yeah, it's all valid.
Yes, it is. It's all, you think of those things when you visit your place and speak to you. What's the most valuable thing you have?
Okay, so one of my mentors was a woman named Beatrice Wood. And I was very fortunate to meet her when she was actually 101. She lived to 106, which is actually now my longevity goal. And I have a collection of her pottery, a couple pieces I bought from her when obviously she was living. And then the rest of my collection were bought from the estate or someone actually on eBay. Some of those pieces are probably the most valuable things that I have is my Beatrice Wood collection. There's a lot of things that are intrinsically valuable just because they're so unusual. Also, one of my major pieces is actually it's the largest piece that I've ever purchased abroad and was able to ship home are my set of 11-foot doors from China that I bought at a salvage yard outside of Beijing and then had them shipped home. And these are about 11 feet tall by 8 feet wide or something like that. And they have these giant granite stones that are the bottom hinge of the door. And actually they cost $1,700 and it cost $1,700 to get them shipped home. But for $3,400, they're actually way, way more valuable than that. Because first of all, you can't even export antiquities like this out of China now. They've cracked down. And they're between 150 and 200 years old. But at this point, like I said, they're very valuable as a museum. And they're not in a huge space. If they were in a major museum, they'd probably have an entire room for these doors.
Yeah.
But they are still one of my most favorite things. For certainly the largest piece that I've ever, like I said, bought on any of my trips and was able to have them delivered.
That's crazy. Yeah, I've seen them and they're very impressive.
Right. Yeah, people
Uh,
are, in fact, I'd say when people come into that part of the house, many people are like amazed by, first of all, they look so old. They look like the giant gates of Valhalla. It's so big and but people are actually really impressed by those doors. And then I tell them the history of them.
yeah. It's just what really strikes me is that there's nothing you won't do. There's nothing you find impossible.
Yeah, and that's something like I said, I had to practice the brain to hand. My brain to hand coordination is impeccable. Like
Yeah.
anything I can think of, I I basically will do. And because I'm well versed in so many different media, I can have the concept, and then the question is this going to be better made in clay or it will be better in wood or metal or whatever concrete? So it's not the barrier, but it's the question is then what's the best suited material for this concept?
What do you think stops most people from doing that, from making their wishes come true or their
Yeah,
dreams
I think
reality?
I have the luxury of having a lot of space here. The entire compound, the house, the main house, and then the foundation house next door. It's on 8.5 acres. I have this amazing workshop filled with of a full pottery studio. I have welding equipment. I've got my jewelry making metal area and several outbuildings that serve as little workshop areas as well. Just the physical plant facilitates doing anything really. There's not, I don't have a a glass hot shop for doing
Mm.
like blown glass.
Mhm.
And that's very expensive. There's no way it would actually even have one of those, but it would be fun, but it's extremely expensive to operate a hot glass shop. But having all these facilities available at my whim, like if I am in this like manic stage of concrete casting, which I was this past summer, I was like going gangbusters on making these concrete sculptures, and then starting to cover them with the mosaic. And right now, these little face pots, so these little ceramic pots, are pretty much this is like my main cash cow right now.
Mhm.
My jewelry business is what has supported me for the last 40 years. And my jewelry business is basically what has built Luna Parc. And very well, the jewelry is very eclectic. I had a very broad audience for the jewelry, but now these little face pots, these silly little face pots, have surpassed my jewelry sales. Now that's also because COVID killed my jewelry business, or at least flatlined it. But I was making these face pots and I still have my very first one that I made, and it's dated 2007. So I've been making them for, what's that? Not quite 2 decades, getting up there. And so now I'm really passionate. I love making these little face pots. I seem to be getting further and further away from the jewelry now. And it's fine. It's just like I went from one medium supporting me to another medium, and I'm not going to give up my jewelry business. In fact, I'm thinking that this coming year might be the last year of my jewelry business as it is, or as it's been for all these decades. And I'm going to morph my jewelry business into something else. And I'm not really sure
Mm.
what that's going to be, but I'm going to reinvent my jewelry business. And because I won't give up my jewelry business completely, because it's still lucrative in some respect, but it needs to evolve. It needs to go into the next iteration
Okay.
of that as well. As so much has happened in my life since the pandemic. And I basically reinvented my entire life, the way I do tours now of the house, my big metal sculpture, the big whirly gigs. I've been able to produce more than I've been. So that's a whole other aspect that I was never able to pay much attention to. And the ceramic. So much has gotten reinvented over the last 4 years, 3 years. And so the jewelry business, it's aching to be morphed into the next stage. And it's a good time in my life. On Friday, I'm going to be 63. And when I think about 63, oh my God. I
And
can't
you do
believe
not look anywhere even
it.
close to
Yeah, and you
63.
know what,
I need
Mitzi,
to know what kind of face cream you use. You have no wrinkles.
I do moisturize, but fortunately, I've inherited my mother's side of the family's skin. My grandmother lived to 103, and you would have not known. She had the most beautiful skin, some wrinkles, but at 103, you would have never known. Never ever known. And unfortunately, from my dad, I've inherited like the receding hairline. But yeah, but I've been here. I've bought my house. I bought my house 35 years ago.
Wow.
And that's what's amazing. When I think 35 years ago, I don't even feel like I'm 35 years old, but it's a long time. And when I think of just starting out, I was 28 years old when I bought this house.
Wow.
And God, I was in my 20s when I
That's
started this
crazy.
project. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I had good opportunities, and I was in the right place at the right time. My jewelry business was going literally like gangbusters. The late 80s were boom years for the jewelry business. So I was making a fairly good amount of money for being in my 20s, enough that I could even consider buying a house. Now, granted, this house was a dilapidated mess when I bought it, but I first laid eyes on that dilapidated house. I knew that this would be the place I would spend the rest of my life.
Mm.
And I had some money available to renovate it. Not perfectly of re-renovated things. Actually, just recently, I've been getting back to trying to spruce up the original little cabin, which I haven't touched in over 30 years. So it's definitely due for a facelift. So
Wow. Oh my gosh. So incredible. You have so many thousands and thousands of objects in your house. If your house, God forbid, were to catch fire, what would be the thing you would grab before you run out?
I would say, so these things right over my right shoulder. So these are pieces that I made over a 3-year period, 3 different winters in Italy. And the technique is called Maiolica. Here,
Mm.
let's see if I can go get one of
Yeah.
them.
So these are
Um,
ceramic pieces.
yeah, they're ceramic. And oops. Yeah, this is one of my favorites.
Oh, look at that.
So this one, I'm one-armed.
Wow. Okay. So for people who are listening, you have to run over to the YouTube so you can see this amazing pot. It's
Yeah.
like
So
a Willy Wonka, Dr. Seuss version of a classic
yeah.
piece
So
of.
this technique is called myolica, and it had its origins actually in the ancient Middle East in the early medieval times, and then the technique made its way across Europe, up through northern Africa, up through the Iberian Peninsula, like Spain, and then made its way to Italy, where it really had its heyday. And so there's this school in Rhode, Italy. I signed it on the bottom. This one's dated 2004. Actually, this is 20 years ago that I made
Oh
this.
my gosh. Was that really, was 2004 20 years ago? Oh my God.
Yeah, so you can imagine. I know. I was thinking about my time in Italy, and I think, oh my God, that was 20 years ago.
Oh,
So yeah, so I did this body of work, and these are still, they're not for sale because I don't know, it just represents to me a period
yeah.
of my life that was just absolute sheer joy for me, because I was there at the school in Rhode, Italy. I got to be very friendly with the people who ran the school. It was like family, and I went back for 3 different winter months. First, I think I was there for 3 weeks, and then I ended up going back for 2 weeks. The next year, I spent 5 weeks, and then the next year, I went back for 5 weeks from January to February. So I made this body of work back then, and to me, they're really unique pieces. So I would have to either grab um, one or an armful of them
Yeah.
and run out of the house.
Oh my gosh.
And also the cat Lily,
Oh, of
just
course,
sleeping right
Lily.
here. She'd probably follow me actually. But
Yeah.
yes, so those are some of my favorite objects in the house. But
Okay. So I don't think you are collecting objects. I think you're collecting feelings and
yeah, I'm
stories.
collecting history and stories. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. There's some objects in the house that are, let's say, superficial, but they're complete whimsy. But yeah, but pretty much everything in the house, like a lot of the artwork, a lot of the folk art that I've been collecting lately it's contemporary folk art. So these are pieces that I buy directly from the person. Actually, I see now over my left shoulder in that display case, there's a tiger, and then there's a figure of someone in green. I don't know if you can see that. So
Yes.
those were made by a folk artist named Howard Finster,
Oh,
and he actually he is deceased now, but he's probably one of the most collected, influential, and famous American folk artists
wow.
right now. And his pieces are now going for a lot of money, where you could buy them directly from him for $20 or $30, and they're literally in the thousands of dollars now. But things like this, interesting folk art. Most of my folk art is actually of a contemporary pieces that I buy directly from the artist. And part of it is I really love being a patron of the arts, because I appreciate when I have patrons and where
Oh,
there's people
yeah.
that collect my work. So I feel like it's a good circle, being collected as well as collecting.
Yep.
So I think it's a good thing to support artists. And I love objects. I love objects. And like you had just mentioned, anything that has any kind of a story, or the person who has a story themselves. Sometimes the person speaks more about their story than their artwork.
Mhm.
Sometimes their artwork speaks more about their life.
Mhm.
But that, I think that's all really interesting.
Yeah, it's super, super interesting. I think whenever you buy a piece of original art, it's a good idea to speak with the artist and get to hear something about what
Absolutely.
was
Yeah.
behind that
Right.
creation.
Mhm. Right.
It makes
Exactly.
so much a difference, and then you bring that into your home, and it's just a beautiful thing. So
Right.
what do you think, Ricky, are the biggest lessons that you've learned in life?
Let's see. Oh, that's a tough question, but I would say that I've been fortunate that, as far as like aesthetically, that I was able to get over obstacles in the creative process that I know a lot of people struggle with.
Mm,
So I would say, for me, understanding what is an obstacle and identifying it so I can either sidestep it or skip over it. But I would say that in my creative process, not letting obstacles get in the way of my creative process. Now, some of that could be financial. Like I built this giant edition, and people think that I've spent millions and millions of dollars. I spent a lot of money on it, but being resourceful and being able to build something like this myself. I built this monstrosity, my museum, and getting over some of the fear of understanding how to construct something on that scale. It's monumental. I don't know many people. I know a handful of people who have set out to build their dream house and achieved it. But I would say that, what was the original question? Sorry.
Your biggest lessons.
Oh, my biggest lessons. So I would say, yeah. So I'd say having to deal with getting rid of some of the obstacles that I've encountered in my life to achieve something really big or great, and relying on resources, like personal resources rather than like financial resources. And I think that what keeps this whole compound going is, of course, it costs money. And fortunately, my artwork sells that I can afford materials. But I would say that using my personal resources and my ingenuity is probably how I've been able to build this and how I continue to support it. So I would say more than anything.
And what about your biggest blessing or blessings in life? What are you most grateful for?
I'm grateful that I had the insight to be able to buy a piece of the earth. And some people would say that, oh, this is only borrowed. We only really borrow this piece of the earth in our lifetimes, but for all argument, so that I was able to buy this little dilapidated house that I called home immediately, and that I was able to transform it with whatever resources I had, my own personal resources or the financial resources. That I feel like this house is a blessing. It's also a little bit of a curse and my nightmare, but it's a blessing that now it's gained so much popularity that it's now supporting itself. And I can see the future where this house and the compound, everything about it, is going to support me in the future until my death at 106. Oh, and by the way, another aspect which I love to point out on my tours is, so I plan to live here literally for the rest of my life. And upstairs on one of the upper levels, right in front of the big doors from China, there's a wooden box set into the floor, maybe about 16 by 6 or so, with a thick piece of glass, a 3/4 inch piece of glass on top, in which my ashes will be someday. So ultimately, when that happens, whenever it happens, the foundation then inherits the entire property, the house, the contents, and everything, and gets my ashes into what I call my little crypt. And there I will be as one of the museum displays in my own museum.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So you know what? And there's another blessing for me, is like knowing, and I don't find it morbid. It's a little morbid. It's a little macabre. But for me, knowing that I will never leave this house, like in my lifetime and in my after lifetime, I am always going to be in this house. And I've actually asked one of my dear younger friends who has done a lot of work with me over the years. And I asked him if he would be the custodian of my ashes and the person to actually get me inside my little capsule. And he said, oh, absolutely. So he just turned, it's funny because he just turned 35. He was born the year that I found my house. And I've asked him to be the curator of my ashes. And I told him, but remember, Paul, if I am 106, you're going to be in your 70s.
That's right. Better be up to the task.
Yeah, expecting that he'll still be around and agile enough to do it. But there is an issue, that not an issue, but a consideration that I always need to find young people to be involved in the foundation, because it's most of the people who are running the foundation are my age and actually a little bit older. And I have some younger people around, but ultimately it's going to be younger people that are going to be running the foundation and basically inheriting the house and the mission and the concept and everything. So I'm always on the lookout for younger students that are really interested in the perpetuity of this project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really something people have to see. And so if you're in the Northeast, in New Jersey, Pennsylvania area, this is a place where you must go. So can you tell people how they can come and see you and get involved?
Okay, yeah. So one of the most important things I can say, that Luna Parc is spelled Lunaparc. When I was going to school in Italy, there's an amusement park just outside of the city limits of Rome, and it's park with a C. It's the Italian spelling of park. And it's really important because if you want to find out any information, my website, which is lunaparc.com, anything about Luna Parc, you have to spell it with a C and not with a K, because what you'll get with a K is Coney Island and many other like Luna Parks in history and around the world. But so lunaparc.com, and ricky@lunaparc.com is my email address. So in order to visit, so I set visiting days. Generally, it's 2 or 3 days each month from May 1st to maybe early November. So I set the days, and then I have time slots to sign up for. And I haven't set any dates for the spring yet, but I would imagine if the weather cooperates, I'll start somewhere early May. And it's limited. I only have maybe 20 to 30 people per hour when I do these, and there could be 2 or 3 hours each of these visiting days. So the days really fill up very quickly now, and it's amazing. I have this mailing list of people who want to come, who have never been here. So it's like this sustainable list of people who want to come and visit. And I am limited how much I can do. I'm working, I'm doing things. So it's not daily, but I try to do it at least 2 or 3 times each month. I think in July, I think I might have done 6 or 7 days. So there's times of the month, different months it's more frequent. So that's basically how to come to Luna Parc. Otherwise, it's not open for visiting. I do have special interest groups. I do private groups for 10 or more people. I just had a group of Girl Scouts a couple of weeks ago, and generally there's no fee for institutions and educational groups. But if people can get a group of 10 or more, just private people, then I can arrange a private tour on certain days.
Mm-hmm. Did you hide some of the more risque collections for the Girl Scouts?
Absolutely. I always have. It's funny. Yes, those are never out when I have.
People will have to come see what I'm talking about for themselves.
But it's so funny. It's so ridiculous, actually, that people think, oh no, his house is full of penises, and if they're not full of penises, they're in one spot. They're in my urinal in my bathroom. That's the only place in the entire house, but it gets like bigger. That's funny.
That is so
bigger
funny.
People's minds know that they're all over the house. No, that's not the case. So I think it's funny, actually. But
it is hysterical. Everything about your place is just fantastical and magical. And it makes you think, it makes you feel alive, it makes you fall in love. Like everything about your house brings out the best in people. So, and also you do that as well as a person. You're just smart, kind, and I know you get angry, but that's okay.
Yeah, those are short-lived.
Yes.
Right now, I'm in so much pain with
I know.
my
Poor
shoulder.
Ricky. All right, we're going to say thank you to Ricky Boscarino for joining us, and Ricky's recovering from rotator cuff surgery. We're going to let him go and heal. And thanks for being with me, Ricky.
My
so
pleasure.
Good.
Thank you, Mitzi. Yeah, it was really fun. I enjoy talking about my favorite thing, which is Luna Parc. So
Luna Parc.
Great. Park with a C.